All right, guys, welcome back. Today's January 15th, right? Midday. This is midday Jan, and usually, from the 1st of January is your highest. This is where you want to go in and get those deals done, and get out the information that helps you succeed in life, right? Even if it's just practice or even just to kind of educate somebody again. So in this topic, I'm here to show you guys a little bit some a little bit different than sales, right? Because as you guys know, I'm a cloud architect by trade, and I have a background in business. I also have a background um, in sales and marketing and networking, and IT and everything, right? I'm out of many pictures, right? So don't worry about me and how many things I have and how many hats I wear. This is what I do for a living, and this is what I am. And this year I'm here to kind of, explain to you that, do what you need to do to get ahead in life, right? Um, you know, we're talking about before how your career accepts you. It doesn't discriminate you. It doesn't care about who you are in the past. It doesn't care about someone like me or somebody that was deficient or singled out as they were child, right? It gives you some sort of label that we used to have, right? It doesn't care about you being introverted. And I mentioned this 100 times. And we don't care who you are in the past. We study. We're hungry. We have that desire. We have that consistency. And this profession can pay you money. you know, I take a lot of this stuff like these newspaper clippings just to kind of show you a little bit about how data centers are and what data center is, because data centers are overlooked. Not a lot of people know what a data center is. See if I can get you some better. Anyway, so again, data centers are the evolution of data centers are specific to being traced back to the early days of computing. And when I say when large mainframe computers required dedication rooms to house a complex, what I meant was what I mean is grab my trusty board, right? So yeah, I have a campus, right? And this big campus um, was housed and blocked with perimeter with steel, anything that was created within this box. And then you know obviously there was divisions of rooms, right? And divisions of rooms and divisions and sections of different areas of that room, and different entrances that part of that room, and different windows are part of that room, and different areas and furniture part of that room. So everything was in this room, in this block, and around the perimeter, right, of this building, right? So even if it was just a window or it was just a door or what's the code? Yeah, there you go. Then that's the actual way it opens. And the different rooms inside and the different entrances within those rooms, and different software that people use to create the specifics of that room. So inside there were large mainframe computers, right? Inside that data center. Didn't know where it was, wherever it was, right? But inside, and that's what kind of housed the complex systems, right? So, overview is when we look from dating back to 1946. And we're going through to COVID here. I know we're in 2026, but if you look at the timeline here, and I'm going to leave this here for a couple seconds, or if you guys want to take a picture and take this into effect of how it was not until the advent of the internet, right? So the internet was from Vint Cerf. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he was the Vint Cerf. Um, he's an American developer, and I'll show you what he looks like here for you guys. Right, you guys know who he is. He's the internet pioneer. He actually works for Google. His name is Vinton Gray Cerf. He's the best, and he's the guy who pioneered internet, and he's one of the founding fathers. He now works for Google, right? He owns Google. I think he should have owned Google, but again, he was a Canadian, British, Irish, Frenchman, Canadian. Born from Aska, Lorraine to Kentucky. He attended high school, with different people and different works. And I'm not gonna go through his whole life story or his biography, but Vinton Cerf is the master, right? He's the guy, the founding fathers of the internet, right? And he shares the title with co-developers of TCP/IP, right? And when we talk about that, we start talking about the RFPs, right? I mean the RFCs, the internet, right? Protocol standards. And we look at RFC 791, right? And I'll post that there for you guys, and you guys can take a look at as architects, I love using the RFCs because it gives me all the information that I need, right? So these internet protocols, they were designed for interconnected system, right? IS. And then that was the motivation, right? And then we can look into what the scope of what the internet protocol was. And he was one of the founding fathers who did that, right? And in my other previous courses and classes, we talk about TCP module and how that could call on the internet module to take a segment, which includes your TCP header and your user data, just as data portion for an internet data. It's complicating, but I'm gonna leave this here. I'm gonna post this here in our notes and make sure that you guys get that. Okay, make sure you guys get that in the WhatsApp video. But again, if you look at the timeline, 1946, we see that the first electronic general purpose computer from ENIAC, and if you guys don't know what ENIAC is, ENIAC uh, just means electronic numerical integrated computer, and that was just the first program. Yeah, let me show you guys so you guys know what, not just looking and listening, but interactive session is important, right? And take your time when you're doing notes. So there's your interact. That was your first electronic numerical integrator and computer, and that was the first digital computer built as at the in US, right, during the World War II, right? So that kind of was unveiled in the 40s, the late 40s onto the mid the early 50s, right? Going back again, COVID, pandemic, through that whole I'm not going to go through the whole timeline, right? Through that whole advent of the internet, but in the explosion of digital data, that data centers became massive facilities that house that, and we can see how we house something within an area that's built around the perimeter, right? Vint Cerf, and I'll write that down for you guys. Vint Cerf, right? We talked about the uh, RFCs, and we talked about, and I'll make sure I give you guys a little bit of that, but I need you guys to take notes. RFCs, and we talked about Vint, Surf, right? So again, then the 20s, COVID-19 happened, which drive the surge in digital services, like they say in this timeline, and that highlights in the critical importance of data centers, right? So it supports our increasingly connected world, and this is where our world is right now, right? The transformation and our digital transformation, right? Because if you think about it, um, in a traditional data center, it makes some time, at least 4 weeks, for like the transformation to happen. And um, in this digital transformation, again, prior to the internet, people worked in a certain way, right? So after the internet, people were just able to do things that were never possible, right? So if a mail, so some, for example, let's say, um, mail, a physical mailman no longer took weeks to send a letter from point A to point B, right? So mail is now, you know, sent through mail, through the internet, right? And that delivery and transfer is a little bit quicker than the normal thing. So, for example, you had a phone call back in the days where we would have to pay and insert a coin uh, to give that call, and or just have a phone call that cost us money, like $3 to $5 per minute, which is now free over the IP phone, right? And then even so, we also have the Internet Protocol Voice over IP link, and again, Internet Protocol's IP, which is now also known as Voice over IP, VoIP, right? For people out there that are technical, and that kind of built way for cloud computing, right? And then this is where cloud computing comes in, where we would rent the space in somebody else's place versus doing it yourself, right? Um, then we could talk about architecture, and again, we could talk about traditional data centers and whatnot, but this is not. This might take a little bit longer, and again, if I teach courses, right? So if you guys are interested, let me know. Um, Data centers are categorized by their ownership and scale and purpose. And again, you have to understand the different types, and make it as easy as possible for you, right? So when you're looking at data centers, it's not just a housing, a wall, right? There's different types. There's enterprises, right? And those are owned by a single company. We also talk about co-location, right? And you'll hear this a lot. And this is all renting space in a multi-tenant facility, right? When we talk about multi-tenants, we talk about multi-tenants, right? You're renting space and you're renting it and it's paid for, right? You're paying for that space. That's housing those tenant, the multi-tenant facilities. So there's different companies in there. There's thousands of companies within there. So if I were to draw this out, you have company A, company B, company C, company D, company E in this section, right? Right? Just alone in this section. Or you'll have, you can also have company A and then company B, right? So that space is rented for that company in this specific area, right? And then you'll also have, whatever, even they can even rent in other areas in the room if they want to, and they can rent like, a square here, and a square over here, whatever the case may be, and then have that digitalized, right? Um, so again, remember what I said. Prior to the internet, people were working a certain way. After the internet, people were able to do things that were never even possible. So um, remember that. Cloud provider hosted virtual resource. What I mean by that, cloud is a hosted virtual resource, right? Provider hosted. So the provider, third party company, virtual in the cloud resource is servers, printers, faxes, whatever the case may be, electricity, networking, anything that's related within that cloud that's virtual or just a piece of software, right? It's not hard, it's not physical, it's a piece of software, right? And it's the underlying software. So if I were to discuss that uh, in a picture, right? Well, you have your co-location, right? Your cloud, right? Which can also be your on-premises, right? And you can also have your cloud, right? And this is what we talk about. And the difference between the two and how the two interconnect with each other, right? And two and how they interconnect with each other, right? Sorry, guys, I'm drawing freehand here. This is a two-way street, right? With information traveling in between both ways, right? So cloud hosted virtual. So you'll have the in the cloud, you'll have a bunch of servers here, right? You'll have a bunch of servers, a bunch of servers, a bunch of servers, right? And then the underlying hardware within these servers or well, virtual servers, right? And they also have disks, right? And then these disks are in the servers, and then this disk has network cards, right? They'll have their network cards. They'll have their network cards of the network, but we're talking about tons of network cards. Doesn't matter. It can have two, three, four, five, and then this will have, a physical disk, a virtual disk, right? And then within those virtual disks, you could subcategorize the file system, right? Between that too. So you have your virtual system, your NTFS, your VMFS, your um, and so forth, right? Um, so again, the underlying hardware, right? So the underlying hardware would be your VNet or your VPC, right? And then your VPC, you would have subcategorized. You would have a availability zone, or you would have a um, and the VPC would then have your availability zones, and within those availability zones, you would have your data centers, right? Multiple data centers, right? And then you'd have a second availability zone within here. You can have a second availability zone within here, right? And then those two data centers would be in here, and then you would have servers inside these data centers, right? And with disks and whatnot, and that would kind of interconnect. And this is all software based, right? Software based. Everything is software based. So it's virtual, right? That's the underlying hardware, right? And then the underlying hardware needs to connect to something, right? So all this stuff here has to connect to something physical, right? So that person's physical laptop, right? So that's person's physical laptop, right? And then and virtualization, right? If you're walking over to the data center, let's say, for example, you're walking to the data center. Oops, change the color here. You're walking to the data center. Obviously, you'll have you have your physical servers, right? Right. And that's a little bit different, right? So understand the difference between the different types of data centers and whatnot. Then we also have our hyperscale, right? And again, those are modern facilities for large tech companies, right? Those are massive, 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 massive. And I want you to do some research on that, and see what you can come up with the next three that I'm going to be mentioning. I want to cut this video in half. So, we have our hyperscaler, then we have our managed data centers where a third party owns it. We have a company that owns it for you and operate it for you, right? And then you have your edge servers, right? So that's more of a geographical distribution center, which has for low latency access, right? It's a little bit smaller. And then you have your optional container module data centers, right? You have your data centers that are in containers. All right, you guys are going to go ahead and research that. Um, Again, enterprise data centers, these are owned, these are built, operated by a single company for its own use. Let's see if I can grab a pen here, right? You have your operated by a single company, one company for its own use. And in an enterprise data center, it's there to support the company's internal IT infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, like my triangle, right? So whatever the IT infrastructure is, right? Within the campus, within the building, within the location of that area where they are, or within the LAN of the environment, or across wide area network, right? So towards that cloud. Sorry, I'm drawing here. The cloud. So that's a cloud here, or I can just add a shape. Let's go back here. I could draw a shape here, insert shapes. So I have everything here. That's here to help me out, right? And let's just pull that out, and I'm going to fill it and so forth, right? So again, through the WAN, right? And again, this is all contextualized. I'm not explaining all of this to you again. This is all being said to you, so make sure you're taking those notes. And we're there to support the company's internal IT infrastructure. And you have to understand what I mean by the internal IT infrastructure, the inside of the infrastructure, right? The data that the users are coming in and data. There's data going inside the servers, right? Or onto their physical laptops, right? Or just the data that's being communicated. Um, and applications, right? So not just the data, but the applications as well too. Right? And right, yeah, so the data that's in the disk, the data that's on the laptop, the data that's in between communication that's transferred from one person to another, right? Or from one user to another, or from one device to a user, or from one. But you have to understand what that means, right? Not just read and take notes, right? Co-location data centers. Again, I call that also known as AKA multi-tenant. So there's multi-tenants in a data center, right? So you have your data center and you have multi-tenants one and multi-tenants two, and then multi-tenant three. And this is in a co-location, right? So you're co-locating with each other. Companies rent space, right? They rent the space. So like I said before, they rent one or they rent two, right? They rent three. And within those are racks, right? Rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of racks and racks and racks. And again, if I were to Google that for you, you could see racks and cabinets inside a data center, right? And that's within Canada, right? And again, if you look at that, right, that's rows. This right here is the data, right? And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to paste it here for a second. Oops. Or about this. Um, what I'm going to do is make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to zoom into this, make this zoom down here. And then I'm going to take a quick snapshot and post it here. Okay. So again, this is our data center, right? And within these companies will um, rent the space, right? They'll rent the space within in these two data centers, for example, and within those they'll house their infrastructure, their hardware, and whatnot, and they'll provide cabling, right? The companies will provide cabling to these racks, and they'll house the equipment, right, for multiple tenants, right? And the reason why we do that, you know what? Let me make this a little bit easier as I create my slides. Okay. All right. So again, the purpose to access the data centers benefits like power, cooling, right? So behind in here, around in here, there's, you're accessing the data centers benefits, right? So they might provide power, they might provide cooling and connectivity without the cost of the building and maintaining the dedicated facility, right? So co-locations is another option, right? Then we have our cloud data center, and our cloud data center was what we discussed before, right? So if we're talking about the different cloud providers or hyperscalers like GCP, Google Cloud Platform, AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Azure, which is Microsoft, offers virtualized computing, again, all software, storage, and networking resources over the internet, right? To take a snapshot. Oops. Just going to take this picture that doesn't make sense. And, you know, we could post it here. We could post it in a data center. just to kind of show you guys it could be the same, right? So these could be the same. This could be your data center. This could be your on premises. This could be your on premises in the building, right? So it could be anywhere that you're located, right? It could be a LAN. It could be your WAN again across the network. So your WAN in between, right? So you have your WAN in between the two. Wide area network, wide area network, right? Between the two. Right? And again, renting it. You could do as much, you could do anything you want to it, but again, it's all uh, for you there. We also have some pictures here for you. Like this is a server. You know, you can have this server, you can have this kind of server, you can have these network cards, you can have, this SAN solution, right? You can have anything you want within here. Right? You can have this in the physical area, right? Not the virtual area because everything is uh is virtual, right? And you will also have, let's see, you can have like, racks of this, and you'll have a rack of this, right? Uh, inside here, inside this data center. So if I were to zoom in, and this is all networking, all 101 for you. And I'm going to get this little color here. So you'll have this inside one of these racks, right? So as you can see, these racks, and I was the technician that drove in and walked with my tool bag and mounted it in one of the racks here on the slots, and I powered it onto the location. I plugged in the network, right? Let's see the backside. Plugged in the network, right? So I came in there and right, and I plugged in the network, right? Plugged in the network. So if this was the back part of it, I plugged in the network to the power, right? So wherever the power supply was, I added the two discs. I turned on the discs, and then I have my networks, right? And then I have my screens, my different ports for one-to-one communication. Um, One-to-one communication or in a one directional or bidirectional. Um, and there you have it. And then my next network cards and then my two power supplies, right? For redundancy and for high availability. So that's what this typical diagram would look like if you were to describe it to somebody who doesn't know what that means, right? And again, when we're looking at, describing these types of areas, the purpose is it's not just description, it's also purpose, right? So what does it do? It provides scalable, it provides flexible IT resources for on demand, right? On demand of for various organizations within your data center, right? In the cloud, right? Software based. And then we have our hyperscalers, enormous data centers, facilities designed to meet vast technical and security demands. So understand what that means. The vast technical and security demands of largest technology companies and cloud providers, right? So know the purpose as to what that is, right? And be able to describe that to your cohorts, to your clients, and be able to design that as well too. Then you have your managed service data center, which is a third party business that has the underlying hardware, physical hardware, and you know they're hosting it on top of that. Um, if I can give you an example, let's see if I can give you an example of that. Give me 1 second. See if I can give you a good example of that. Right? Sure, guys, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can get you guys on. Okay. Trying to find something for you guys in this video because I'm not gonna make this video too long, but there might be a part two if I get enough likes or if I got people to join this course. Uh, and I'm describing here. Um, I want to get you guys a good information as to manage service data centers. These are companies that own, right? Um, they own the hardware, right? And they're managing this hardware, right? So they provide that service to the company in a virtual environment. So they'll have the virtual machines or they'll own the network, right? And they deal with the cloud providers, right? Right. So if this goes down, they go to the store and they buy it. If this goes down, they go to the marketplace and buy it, right? So anything virtual versus physical, right? So they'll go to the marketplace and buy it. They'll go to the store and buy it, right? Um, or if anything happens in the cloud, then the cloud will take care of that, right? So just as the managed service provider, anything goes down, they take care of that. But I want to get you guys some information on that. Give me 1 second. Um, AWS. Let's do. Should have had this ready. As I apologize, but I want to give you guys a better understanding of, you know what? I think I know where it is. Okay. And this might be, we're talking about storage gateways here. This is okay. Storage gateway. And oops. Just bear with me. See, I also might have a video on that. So I might just end up giving you the video so you guys can take a look at that. And I'll make sure that you guys have that in the um you guys have that for sure. So let me take a look at my videos here and I'll give you guys a copy of that.
Run and search.
All right, let's see. Let's see. Storage gateway. And I think I explained it here in this video. So I'm just going to give it, there we go. Um,
For VMware, then we'll have our Microsoft.
and I'll send you guys a link here. But just to give you guys, I don't know what's this here. Okay, so just to give you guys a better idea, like I said, you have your physical environment and then your underlying hardware, which is, and then on top of it, you have your software, which is either an application based or it could be virtual based, right?
Good book to read. It's I Own This.
Right. So again, it's there to provide outsourced data storage, right? So you have your data storage, the data that's inside the storage, right? So whatever disks you guys have are virtual disks, and computing for businesses, right? So you're giving them that storage and computing for those businesses, and also you're looking to reduce overhead for them, and that's what the managed service data centers come. Optional container modes, again, they're just shipping containers, packaged, plug and play. This concept was introduced like 15 years ago. Now it's being used as temporary and permanent deployments, right? So you'll have to find those modular data centers on like a construction site, for example, right? You're on a site, and then that's where you go. Here's what a typical data cloud looks like. Again, I'm not going to draw this out for you, but you have your HVAC systems housing the data center cloud. You have your generators, your PC transformers. You have your RS, your forward IDS firewalls, IDS, IPS systems. And then you have your internet and intranet, which is inside the cloud, and then your internet, which is outside the cloud, outside the data center, right, into the cloud, right, the world. And then you also have your networking, you have your IGP, EGP, EBGP, IGB, you have your private lines, your point of presence, and then et cetera, right? So I'm not going to dissect everything, but this is what a typical data center would look like. You have install that one application server, uh, you know, application server or just a server itself. You have your networks, you have your open management consoles, right? And you're going to look for a server and create a VM inside those servers, right? We also have, again, another type of server that has a CSAB, right? Where we use Zscaler and that will handle RIM. I'm not going to talk about that. Applications, no, I'm not going to talk about that. This is complex. Does this look complex? In here, I'm talking about Kafka queues on every single provider on a VM. So there's no interoperability challenges whatsoever, right? So you can add that option where we can reduce write content, and that's not what the course is about here. There we go. So we have different options for data centers, right? So I'm going to give you one option for now, and then I'll let you guys go on from there. If you want to learn more, reach out to me, send me a message on WhatsApp, and we'll discuss what the future looks like for you and wanting to learn about data centers, right? So you have your data center here, and again, this is data center to Azure, right? So Azure is one cloud, right? Or Azure to VPN, right? So Azure to VPN, right? There's your VPN. Create a VPN between both cloud providers, or to AWS to reach, right? Or you can have two WAN connections, as you can see in my drawing here, the WAN connections from data center to Amazon Web Services. And then you'll have your 2 times for redundant WAN links. Obviously, you're going to have 2 for high availability. There's a lot of people right now saying that they want 3. If you have the money for it, why not? And again, that's all in what you're going to spend, right? Or you could have 2 WAN connections to each cloud, right? So, like I said, that's your option, right? All right, let me grab a pen here. 2 instead of 1, right? And that can run off of your router, right? Or it can run off of a VPN, right? Or it can run between your virtual routers and your physical routers in your data center, right? Or it can run through the internet to the AWS, right? So there's different ways of doing that. Again, fiber cabling, outages, that's something else. Know the different tiers. You guys should know your different tiers. So there are some key factors. Oh, do you know them? The tiers? If you don't, here's my last slide. When we're talking about tiers, we talk about from tier one and we work our way up to different tiers, right? So in our tier one, we're looking at the most basic, and that right there, and again, in my courses, I can dive down deeper into that. This is more of a basic tier with where you have a single path of power and cooling, right? Remember what we talked about with the data centers, surrounding the outer area, right? Or sometimes inside the areas, or sometimes in the locations that they're housed in, right? Or they're able to, they were brought in from the underground or over wires or wherever that system was coming from, right? And again, no redundancy, right? Downtime is possible here, so there may be downtime, especially for your 5.9 guys, your 5.9s, right? Or 4.9s, whatever your company is comfortable with, whatever you guys want to reach, right? And that downtime is possible during either the maintenance or the equipment failure, right? Then we work on to our second tier level, and my tier levels again. I love my tier levels, right? 1, 2, 3, and then 4 at the tip of the tier, the host, the roof, I call it. So this one here adds some redundancy. So you're adding the redundancy. So with the redundant component for power and cooling. So there's your redundancy. And however, there is still downtime there. Again, 5.9s. We have to look into that and see how that kind of helps you and how you're able to help the company fix that problem, right? During the maintenance or the equipment failure, right? So if something goes down, then your whole data center is down, right? So even if there's some maintenance happening there may be some downtime. Just be aware of that, and account for your RTOs and account for your RPOs, right? Know what time it's going to take, how long it's going to take, and when it's going to get completed. Typical data centers, new data centers, they have that timeline. They're being built at the specific time and date, so they can work around those areas and have those numbers for you, right? As architects, we have to know all this stuff too as well. So I do, of course, I do, right? But again, the business aspect of it is, we can engineer all this, we can design all this, but can you implement this? Can you deploy all this stuff, right? And that's what the underlying factors are. In tier three, right? My favorite tier, it provides a concurrent maintainability, right? So it's concurrent to maintaining it, which means that our maintenance or the maintenance can be performed without any downtime. So that's good, right? And it includes multiple paths, right? So we got multiple paths, multiple paths, right? And paths could be lines, right? Paths, walkways, walking towards these different areas, different zones within your building, right? And that path for power and cooling are dedicated areas or just anywhere, right? For redundancy components, right? So what is this connected to? What's this going to be redundant to? Having another power cooling area, two power cooling areas, right? One and two. And for accepted distribution path, right? So where that distribution path is going. Number 4, our final tier. This is the highest tier with fault tolerance, which means that the data center can continue to operate. And the higher you go, right, in these tiers, the more you're going to understand and where to work with, right, what to work with. And this is obviously meaning like that the data center can still continue to operate, right? There's no downtime. Um, Still continue to operate even if there's an equipment failure, like something goes down in the data center, right? Power goes down, right? And then the second generator kicks in, or the HVAC system is overheating our servers or our rack systems, blah 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 blah, right? So, and that includes the distribution path as well, right? So power, cooling, redundant components, and everything, right? End off with some of the pictures. Again, here's some hot aisles, some cold aisles, right? Raised floors, right? What that matters, why that matters, especially in the construction and the building of that, and how these two coincide, and what these guys do for the front of the servers and what these guys do for the back of the servers, right? Um, Quickly, again, we talked about servers, we talked about racks in earlier pictures, we talked about cooling systems. So this is what this all looks like, right? If you're designing it. And again, take mental notes, take mental notes, take mental notes, do some research, and design your own videos. Educate yourself on this stuff and work with your teams, and see how that works. Your assignment here is to create your own video, and give me your perspectives, and what you think, what you think about data centers and why you would use data centers, right? In any environment. I want to thank you guys again. Have a good day.